Have you ever looked at a simple drawing and wondered what it would be like if it came to life? Today, I'm bringing this little samurai cat from a sketch into a living, breathing 3D world. Hey everyone, I'm Nandu from Tales and Pixel and welcome back to the channel. In today's project, I challenged myself with something a little different. My goal was to learn the basics of sculpting inside Blender, creating a stylized painterly texture completely by shaders, adding in subtle animations, and experimenting with a cinematic idea, a world that starts in black and white and blossoms into color. By the way, I've made the full Blender project available for free. You can find the download link in the description if you'd like to explore the scene up close or use it for inspiration. If you find this helpful, I'd really appreciate if you could like, share and subscribe. It really helps support the channel and future projects like this one. Alright, let's jump in, starting with the sculpting. For sculpting, I followed the Sculpting in Blender for Beginners tutorial by CG Post. I'll leave a link in the description if you'd like to check it out for yourself. It was a great starting point. With my reference image set up in the background, I began blocking out the basic forms using primitive shapes and the grab brush, just to nail the overall silhouette. To speed things up, I added a mirror modifier so I could work on both the ears symmetrically, and that is definitely a time saver. For the stylized details, I mainly use the clay strips and the scrape brushes. They gave me those soft yet defined planes that matched the painterly look that I was looking for. I also use this pinch brush quite a bit. It's super helpful for sharpening edges or tightening creases around the face and the ears. For the clothing, I duplicated part of the body mesh, separated it out, and remeshed it in the sculpt mode. Then, I shaped the folds using a combo of clay strips and draw sharp, switching between adding and subtracting it with a control key. The base rock was sculpted using the scrape brush again, exaggerating the edges to get those super stylized angular shapes. Finally, I modeled the katana and whiskers using simple box modeling technique. Nothing fancy, just clean and functional. For the painterly texture, I was heavily inspired by the fantastic tutorial from Southern Shorty. I also used the custom brush texture they provided. The link's in the description, so definitely check it out and show some love. To achieve the painterly effect, I combined a Voronoi texture with an actual brush texture as a normal map. It took some trial and error to strike the light balance. To push the stylized look even further, I used a solidify modifier along with the secondary outline shader. This gave the models a bold, inked edge, something that mimics the visual charm of grease pencil. Once I was happy with the base shader, I assigned different paint materials to each part of the model and tweaked the color and roughness values to give every piece a hand-painted quality. Finally, here are the screenshots of both my paint shader setup and the outline shader, just in case you'd like to refer to them or build on them in your project. Once the base model was in place, I used grease pencil to highlight some of the more stylized features of the samurai cat, like the facial lines, subtle folds in the cloak, and accent marks around the ears and eyes. Grease pencil really helped to add that extra layer of 2D charm without breaking the flow of the 3D model. It was a perfect tool to bridge that hand-drawn feel with the painterly textures. Next up was building out the background. I kept things simple and stylized, just some soft rolling mountains and chunky clouds. I started with basic mesh shapes and adjusted them using the sculpt tool to smooth out the silhouettes or to exaggerate certain curves. The idea was to make the scene feel light and storybook-like, almost like it was cut out of a painting. It was time to dive into the water shader. For this part, I followed the Stylized pool shader tutorial by Kai to learn some of the basics, and it was super helpful. I've linked the video in the description if you want to check it out. To create the rippling water effect, I used a Voronoi texture combined with a color ramp and mixed that with a noise texture to add some variation in color and break up the uniformity. I also added a bump node driven by the same Voronoi texture and plugged it into the normal input of the shader, giving the surface subtle height and light interaction. Finally, I animated the movement by keyframing the mapping node coordinates, giving the water a gentle, drifting motion across the surface. At this time, I decided to add a few dynamic clothing elements, specifically a flowing scarf and a simple cloth belt to give the character more movement and personality. I started off with basic shapes to block them out, just using cubes and planes, and then brought them into the sculpt mode to add more folds, curves, and a subtle flow. The clay strips and grab brushes really helped here, especially for exaggerating the cloth behavior in a stylized way. The goal wasn't realism, but more of a soft, expressive feel. Next, I wanted to add some volumetric fog to give a sense of depth and atmosphere. I thought this would be a quick step, but I actually ran into a few unexpected issues. At first, plugging in a principal volume shader just gave me a thick grey blob. Not at all what I was aiming for. To create a smooth vertical fade, I added a gradient texture into a color ramp and connected that into the density input. That helped define where the fog would show up. To give the fog a bit more texture, I mixed in a noise texture with a volume scatter shader, which added some soft variation and randomness to the density. Finally, I adjusted the emission color and strength until I got that soft, glowing, white fog I had in mind. Here's a quick screenshot of the shader setup if you want to try it out in your own project. To bring a bit of life into the scene, I added some subtle animation using shape keys, mainly to animate the ears and the scarf. One challenge I hit was with grease pencil animation around the ears. I tried using interpolation at first, but it didn't move the strokes the way I wanted. So I ended up going old school, manually keyframing each and every stroke and duplicating it over the timeline. It was definitely a bit tedious, and I'm sure there's a better method, but I wanted to preserve that hand-painted grease pencil look, so I stuck with it. For the scarf, I skipped grease pencil entirely and relied on the outline shader to give it definition. Originally, I felt the character needed something to ground their pose. So I gave my meditating samurai a small katana to hold. Instead of modeling it from scratch, I just duplicated the original katana and made a few adjustments to the scale and grip before placing it into the hands. To enhance the mood even further, I used grease pencil one last time to add subtle creases and shadow accents around the fabric and face. These small details really help pull the visual style together. For the foliage, I wanted to keep it simple and stylized. I modeled some basic grass shapes from a plane, added a black shader, and duplicated them to build up a cluster. To animate the grass, I use shape keys again and sync their movements to the ear animation. Just a little sway to tie everything together. The trees in the background were even more minimal. Since they sit far from the camera, I wasn't too concerned about their detail. I added a bend deformer and animated it with a slight rotation to make them feel alive. And finally, the color transition. To move from the black and white to full color, I kept the approach really simple. I just keyframe the color values on the shader nodes, starting with grayscale tones and slowly shifting them into their full color version. The transition is slow and intentional, almost like the scene is waking up. And here it is, the final render. Thanks for sticking around and let's take a closer look.